Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you happen to be watching and it's a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Well, guys, it's 2025. It's the start of a new year, and you know what that means. It's a certain occasion when a certain someone returns to discuss a very specific topic over here on our channel, though it is still amazing to know that this is the fourth year that we're doing this. So, Gabby, it is always a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you for having me. It's crazy that it's been 4 years already. Time flies.
I know so many things have happened in our lives, so many things have happened in the world of film and entertainment, but I always get excited to just come back and do a small recap of all the things that Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe offered us in the past year. Though the one thing that I definitely was sort of hinting at you when we were trying to reconnect and get ready to do this show tonight, I'm really hoping that this is not going to be the only time that we see you on the channel every single year. I'm trying to find some other things to get you involved in. Particularly, I'm really hoping, because I've been trying to get this off the ground, I'm still trying to get a DC film thing going too. And now that we have a whole new DC cinematic universe, I would love to talk about that stuff too. So I'm hoping that we can do this twice a year rather than once a year.
I would be down. Yeah, I like life has been very, very crazy, but I'm at a point now where I feel like life is getting a little bit more consistent, and I'm also getting better at developing like better day-to-day practices and just like scheduling and allotting my time better. That I think that would be fun to start to get to move
Time
into that.
management is always of the essence. Living and dying by a calendar, that's important. I've
Yeah.
managed to get my 2.5-year-old daughter into such structures and routines. So it's so easy to actually manage to get these types of projects off the ground. And now, considering that she is getting to the certain point where I can actually pawn her off to grandparents for a weekend, I can actually go to the movies and actually enjoy myself a little bit. But I will say that, having certain streaming services is also a big plus. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to talk about much. I would say about 80% of the stuff that we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
So I want to recap, because what I always like to do before Gabby and I would get together, I always like to see where we ended in the last episode that we recorded. And where we left was discussing the state of the film industry, including the SAG-AFTRA strike and the way that people were feeling about the superhero movie. And the key takeaway from the end of that conversation was Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe trying to go with a quality, not quantity sort of direction, particularly in this year, and ending the first half of phase 5 and preparing to go into the second half of phase 5. And of course, this summer, kicking things off with phase 6. I guess the question is, did they do a good job this time around?
Yeah, it is a good question. Yeah, I mean, I will say like this right off the bat is that we don't have too much to discuss. I believe we have like 5 different productions that we're
I
going to
think
get into.
it's going to be an interesting one because it's one feature-length film, 2 Disney Plus Marvel television series, and 2 animated projects. One that's not linked to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and one that is, but the one that's not linked to the cinematic universe is something we have to talk about, because it was
It's
for
coming.
and not just that, for every person who wanted some kind of a saving grace, this was one of the things that Marvel offered this year, because everybody talked about it, everybody loved it.
Yeah. I think like it was again like because we mentioned we like just the breakdown of the type of productions they put out. I think like at least for me 2024 was such a crazy year that it was almost nice to be able to have a little bit of a take a back seat, I think take a step back and not have as much content to consume and just kind of be able to enjoy what they released when they released it. And I think like they also spaced out the releases of everything really, really well. So it wasn't, because I know there was times where there was like Disney Plus shows that were overlapping with Marvel movie releases, where there would be like a finale for one of the shows airing around the same time that there's a movie in theaters. So it just felt so congested. And I think this was a very nice pacing overall for everything that was released. And it just felt nice, I think, to, after several years of just lots of content coming out at once, to take a little bit of a backseat. I think people needed that break, and I think it's going to do them really, really well going into 2025 when there is a lot of stuff to look forward to and get excited
I
about.
sure hope so, and I really do agree with you. Like I've said in the previous sit downs that we've had, I always like to go into these films and television shows with an open mind, because, and to a certain degree, unfortunately, these days, very low expectations, because I don't know what I'm going to get. And if I go in with that mindset, I may get very surprised. And I'm just going to foreshadow, and I'm not going to say what I'm referring to. I did actually get surprised one time this time around. So this is something that we didn't discuss before we planned our recording date. And the question is, how are we going to go about this? Are we going to go in release date order, or are we going to break it up film, television, animated series? Like, how would you like to go about this?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that before we started recording, if you had an idea in mind for how you wanted to run things down. I feel like in years past, we kind of went through like films in order and then Disney Plus releases at the end. And so I guess maybe to remain consistency, yeah, we can kind of maybe break it down by project type.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that
that
makes
might be the
sense.
right thing to do. And the most important thing is, because we had such a small amount of content, we can actually go into some of these things a little bit deeper. I know that we
Yeah.
normally go into the films with so much more detail, but I also am glad, because of the small amount of projects that we got this year, that we really can go deeper into some of these, because there are reasons to go deeper into some of these projects.
Yeah. And there's like
So,
lots of stuff to discuss about them for sure
yeah.
too.
So I think we should try and end on a high note. So let's go into the live action Disney Plus series first.
Perfect.
I gotta say, I am happy and furious all at the same time, because I completely forgot about the fact that Echo came out. And it was one of those things that I wished I had. I literally forgot about it, completely
Yeah.
forgot that it existed. But I'm so glad that you reminded me, because the fact that if I would have left it out, you know me, I'm a person who likes to be consistent. I'm a person who doesn't like to leave any stone unturned. If I would have forgotten about Echo, I would have been very upset with myself, and I wouldn't have a complete series discussion. So yes, we have to talk about Echo, unfortunately.
Yeah, especially because looking forward to 2025, and obviously we'll get there. Daredevil Born Again is coming out this year in March.
Fingers
And
crossed.
yeah, fingers crossed. There's been, you mentioned the SAG strike, and the first thing that came into my mind was like Daredevil Born Again being impacted by the SAG strike and them having to do a complete whole rewrite. So I'm curious, not, again, not to jump the gun too much, to see how that all plays out. But yeah, like Echo, I was taking some notes and kind of writing things down, and it is interesting because it only has 5 episodes, so it has
Yeah.
significantly less episodes than some of the other traditional like Marvel, Disney Plus, MCU shows. They also build it as a Marvel spotlight, which is different than how they bill and promote some of their other Disney Plus shows. So it just felt like from the very beginning, it felt like they just weren't treating Echo the same way that they treat some of their other productions, because also all 5 of the episodes were released all at once. That was another thing too. They didn't get a weekly release, and it was right at the top of 2024, like the very, very beginning of the year. So like you said, after a whole year of stuff going on and some other releases that I think got a lot more attention, very easy to forget that the show existed. I just wasn't even sure. Like my biggest thing is I was like, I didn't even remember if we discussed it last year or not, because it did come out so early in the year. But yeah, we haven't talked about it yet, so I'm glad that we are. And I think it's just a bummer that the show kind of got sidelined, because I think the representation is really important, and it is sort of a nice stepping stone to leading us to Daredevil Born Again and setting it up. But it doesn't feel like the show, at least by Marvel, was treated with that same respect of like this story is going to get us somewhere. It just kind of felt like, here's the 5 episodes. And I think they could have done better at giving the show more love and making the story deserving of, the representation and, what it's bringing to the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, when I was trying to gather my thoughts on this, I was like, how badly do I want to get canceled this evening? That was my overall feeling. So look, the fact that I even watched the show was a freaking miracle of modern age. Like, I really did not want to watch the show. This is a character in the comics that I don't even know where to even find her. I don't even know what heroes or villains she's linked to. I mean, I know that we were first introduced to her in a very much liked series, Hawkeye, which I very much enjoyed, being the fact that I just thought it was a fun addition. And I also am a big fan of Haley Steinfeld, and I'm so excited to hopefully see her return as Kate Bishop. But yeah, I think that this show just got a true raw end of the stick. I mean, there's, using some foul language, there are ways to turn chicken shit into chicken soup. You just got to give it that tender love and care. And they couldn't even get Daredevil right in that show. Like, the fight scene between them was so horribly choreographed, and the lighting was so terrible. Like, I felt bad for Charlie Cox as well. I'm like, you're getting an opportunity to see Daredevil again in an action sequence in the first episode by that, and they just don't do it right. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, and I love what they did with this character in the Daredevil series when it was originally on Netflix. And Vincent D'Onofrio is such a great casting choice to play this character because he came out of nowhere. Like, no one would have ever expected him to play Wilson Fisk, and he just killed this character. And I just felt that there was no way to even make that character interesting in the show as well. I just got to be honest. I found the show so lifeless and boring, and it made me really upset because I want every Marvel project to be a good show, whether it's a movie or a TV show, because Gabby, I don't think you know this, but I'll just say this anyway. Even the comics are not doing well. Not many people are out there buying Marvel comics, last year was such a tumultuous year for the big two, DC and Marvel, in comic books and all around entertainment. I mean, all the skepticism with James Gunn and Pete Safran over at DC. But DC, towards the end of 2024, got the memo, and they started their all-in initiative in the comics. And there are some incredibly good writers and artists in these DC comics. And Marvel is still trying to figure out what to do with themselves. It's sad, considering the history and the legacy and the lore that is found within the pages of these comics and now found in these films and television shows. I just don't understand why they decided to go in the direction that they went with Echo. I just couldn't figure it out. And when the show was done, the only significant thing was the fact that Wilson Fisk announced that he was going to consider running for mayor of New York City.
Right. Like, it very much just felt like they treated the project as like, okay, we're going to set up Daredevil born again and kind of like, answer the question. Like, again, you see at the end of Hawkeye that Fisk gets shot, and you're like, is he alive? Is he obviously, he's alive, but that's the cliffhanger they're setting up, right? And so it kind of just like answers that question for you. Again, you get to see Charlie Cox's Daredevil, which is exciting. But again, like, I also felt like there was a lot of people who were just like super excited about that cameo, and then it's like, what about the rest of the show? Because I think like, again, Maya is a really interesting character, and Alakwa Cox is phenomenal. Like, I think from what she portrayed with that character in Hawkeye, and then what scenes she does have in the show, or her part in the show, like, she is a good actress. And I think it is, like, again, there's so much potential for that character, but the show didn't do it. And I think it just, again, like, I said before, the way that they set it up, just like, even, not giving it a weekly release schedule and like giving it that momentum, they just very much like, this was a show that got
Yeah, and
very much.
they
Like,
even tried to work her up in the comic books with a miniseries, and that didn't even sell a single issue, like a barely sold a single issue. And the other question that I really wonder is, this also goes back to what we discussed back in the beginning of 2024, and that was the whole situation where Marvel with Phase 4 just left so much on the table and so many heroes and villains left in by the wayside. Like, where are we going to go with these characters? Like, are we ever going to see Echo again?
yeah, that's also like another a significant problem that you bring up is that they've introduced so many characters. Like they've introduced the Eternals, and now it's like we may never see those characters again. You know,
See Kingo in a certain place that we'll
yes,
talk about later.
yes. So there's yeah, that was a fun episode, but we'll get into that. But they just have put so much on their plate, and I think they've bit off more than they can chew, and so they're trying to give certain characters love and representation and trying to give them all their own shows. But again, then it just becomes so much. And so it's just then I feel like half-ass job that's done trying to give all these different characters their stories and their like their piece of the puzzle, and there are a lot of characters that then end up getting sidelined, and then there's also just like reality, and that kind of like plays a role, so stuff that's outside of the studio's control, because and I mean I don't know if we were going to talk about this, but or save this for the end, but like thinking about, we talked about Ant-Man Quantumania last year, and that film, and now we kind of everything that film set up now for reasons it's beyond Marvel's control may kind of be like kicked to the wayside, as they bring Robert Downey Jr. back for to the MCU.
Yeah. Let's save that for
Let's
the end.
save that.
Please save that for the end, because the weirdest part about that was the fact that all the charges were dropped against Jonathan Majors. So now what's going to happen? Like,
Yeah,
it's that whole hot mess just got so much. Literally, the fire was extinguished, and now it's even in a worse spot than it was when things were out of control.
yeah, so it's again, but it's just like this, and I like it to, I mean, not again, like I don't want to take us too far from the original conversation, but it is just all of these problems that snowball and spiral on top of each other that makes for not appealing content, and so it is just unfortunate that this show was so sidelined, because I think the ending scene, at least, like again, it's been so long since I've watched the show, it's been over a year and it's not super memorable, but I do remember liking, I think, like the ending scene, like the ending fight scene between Fisk and Echo, like that scene being really really good, because I think she's like punching him at one point and he's getting the flashbacks to his childhood. Like I remember that being a really powerful scene, but yeah, overall it's like not super memorable. I think that's kind of the takeaway.
Yeah, I know. It's a shame, really, because I'm curious to see what Daredevil Born Again is going to be, because the thing about Kingpin is he is such a powerhouse villain, and it was shown that in the 1990s Spider-Man animated series, because he is also not just a villain towards Daredevil, he's a villain of Spider-Man's as well.
Right.
And I would love to see Daredevil Born Again spark an opportunity to find a way to make Wilson Fisk a threat to Peter Parker as well, and maybe get one of those great opportunities to team Peter Parker and Matt Murdock up together, especially considering the fact that they did meet each other in Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yes, I feel like they're hopefully building to that.
I'd love for that to happen.
The idea of the crossover of the two of them, that was such a fun moment.
No, when Charlie Cox showed up in that scene, I know that it was a long time after the movie had been shown in theaters, but there were still people in the theaters that just had their jaws hit the floor because they were just so excited to see him. And again, I go in as a movie fan, I go in as a comic fan, just getting the opportunity to see Daredevil and Spider-Man in a room, but not knowing that they are Spider-Man and Daredevil, just gave me so. See, that was the thing about Spider-Man No Way Home. It gave me hope for the future. Yeah. That's really
it was such a good Spider-Man movie that just gave love to like all of those films. We talked about that. sidebar while we're still here. I got to meet Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio this year. I was at GalaxyCon Oklahoma City, and they were both there, and I got to meet them both very briefly, and they're wonderful individuals. So I'm psyched for them and psyched for Daredevil Born Again.
Me too. Me too. I really am expecting the best from that show. I really am.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be fun. And hopefully, you know, the fact that they had to rewrite it because of the strike, like, meant that they had, you know, more time to sit down at the table, reevaluate what they're doing in creative production that's really, like, worth people watching. And I think there's a lot of anticipation around that, and they know that. And I feel like Echo just, like, wasn't that same thing, you know?
Exactly. So we ended up going from a show like Echo, fast forward towards Halloween, and then we get a show that everybody knew was coming and nobody was interested in it whatsoever. And that, of course, because people were wondering, why is this character getting her own show? And of course, we're talking about Agatha Harkness, who is, of course, played by the brilliant Kathryn Hahn. She had such an impact in WandaVision. But again, as a completionist, I basically bit my tongue and said, you know what? I'm going to watch this show. I have to admit, there were parts of the show that I found tremendously entertaining and fun. And I think it's because of the fact that the cast that they chose for this show, they chose the right people. I still am laughing inside now knowing that Broadway sensation Patti LuPone is now part of the MCU. That is one of the weirdest ideas to figure out there.
Her solo episode, the episode that was really focused on her character, was phenomenal. God, it was so good. She's a powerhouse actress.
Yeah. But also having Aubrey Plaza in the MCU as well. I mean, you know, that she's such a delight no matter what she's in, and she's done a comic book movie or two before. I first discovered her in Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and I love her in that movie. But and getting Deborah Jo Rupp again, who was in WandaVision, of course, we all know her as Kitty from that 70s show. You know, just a great cast of characters. They were the ones that managed to turn something that could have been a complete dumpster fire into something that I personally felt was watchable and entertaining. Now, did we need this show? Absolutely not. But there was one piece of the show that showed us why Agatha All Along was relevant to the current storyline of the MCU.
Are you talking about Joe Locke as Wiccan?
Exactly. We're talking about Wiccan being revealed. Exactly. Yes. What else would it have been? I was watching, and then when Kathryn Hahn says, "You're so much like your mother," I'm like, there it is. That reveal
was so good with Billie Eilish's "You Should See Me in a Crown," like in the background, and then the whole that was so good. Yeah, I like this show. I feel like I'm curious at what point, like, in the process, that Marvel decided that this was something they were going to do, because I feel like they couldn't have gone in to WandaVision and then been like, okay, we're going to do WandaVision and then, like, give Agatha her own show, and that's going to, you know, like, how much they've roadmap ahead. Because I really think Agatha All Along, like, the song becoming super popular, made them be like, okay, we have to do something with this character, give her own sidebar, and then we can use that to introduce Wicked, and then kind of, like, get us further down the road to the Young Avengers. And it really does feel like, again, a lot of these Disney Plus shows felt like, you know, their focus has been on, you know, one of the returning MCU characters who's kind of been around for a while and sort of introducing their, like, younger counterpart and setting up the next generation of Marvel, essentially. And that, I mean, that felt like what the show was. But yeah, it's such a phenomenal cast. Like,
it really is.
Aubrey Plaza and Kathryn Hahn together are great. Also want to shout out Sashir Zamata, who was an SNL alum. She was very fun, and she had some good moments.
It's just awesome to get a diverse set of talent. You know, that's what I think is really great. You got people of comedy, you've got Broadway stars, you've got genuinely dramatic and comedic minds. It was a perfect blend acting wise, I thought. And you know, it was the perfect thing to come out between, because it was nice to get it around Halloween time because I will also say there were some parts that were genuinely scary. I will not lie that there were some genuinely scary moments. And I'm
Yeah.
glad about that because we've been hearing about the fact that the dark side of the Marvel Universe exists. I mean, when we got that one shot short film, Werewolf by Night, it was an absolutely fun watch. And we're still waiting for a couple of other things to actually finally drop, and the Blade movie for one. But the dark world exists in Marvel, and we haven't gotten enough of it. So I feel
Yeah.
that Agatha All Along, if anything, was there to do very similarly what Echo is doing for Daredevil Born Again, to just push the dark universe along and get the opportunity to get some more of the dark universe characters out there into the MCU because they deserve to be there. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe Moon Knight is part of that one as well. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. Oh, I hope we see more of Moon Knight. That I really did
Well,
like
we
that
did in
show.
What If too, but
Yes. Yeah. I feel yeah, there's again a lot of these Disney Plus shows I feel like are just kind of setting us up like, yeah, we're getting there, we're building momentum to the bigger things. Um Also, another thing I thought was fun and was not expecting at all. I was not expecting them to bring Evan Peters back as Ralph Boner.
yeah,
That
that was crazy.
absolutely, like, once I saw we were getting there, and I was like, no, and that was I had a good time with that. That was fun to see him come back because I know a lot of people were pissed off about how that went in WandaVision, and so I think that was just
No,
fun.
considering what all of the Disney Plus shows, or at least most of the Disney Plus shows, have already done, they've really dropped a lot of the possible young Avengers. I mean, we've got Miss Marvel now, we've got Kate Bishop now. We had that young boy in Captain America: The Winter Soldier who was supposed to become the Patriot. I don't know if Hulk's son is going to be part of this team, but right now, the way that the show was finished was the fact that we were left on a cliffhanger with Billy's pursuit of Tommy. And I'm wondering if he will actually find him. And the more important thing is, when will we actually see their reunion? And when will we actually see them as part of the Young Avengers?
Yeah, it felt like it could have easily been like, yeah, I am curious. Like, as I watched the show end, I was like, okay, well, now how are they gonna get there? Like, do they, because I don't think they set up, I think Agatha All Along was set up to be a limited series, so I don't think they are gonna do a second season of the show, although it
I
felt
don't
like
think
that
so.
very much felt like the best route to go. Yeah, I'm just curious how, like, where do you go next with that? Um, I also have to say, because I have watched Heartstopper, like, Joe Locke was great. It was fun to get to see him do something so radically different from Heartstopper, which is a very like cutesy Netflix rom-com,
I've
and
heard.
to see him play like an edgier character and to like watch that pivot like from his character as teen to then into Wiccan, and to see the whole costume and everything like that. He was really, really great. Um, and is super talented too. He's been on Broadway now since doing Heartstopper. He's now in the MCU. Like, that's someone who has a very bright and wonderful future ahead of
Well,
him.
I will
Hopefully.
also say one of the parts of the show that really was something that I really appreciated was the fact that they nailed the authenticity of the bar mitzvah. As someone who's had a bar mitzvah and knows the ceremonies, that was practically perfect. I was so impressed with that. I really
That's
was.
good to hear. Yeah. I just also thought the whole twist was interesting. Like, I was very much watching
Yeah,
it week to week, being like, how is this gonna go? Like, where is the story going? Like, I was having fun with it. And I liked also like we talking about the costuming too, because we do like very different costuming and hair and all of that. And as someone who works for a beauty magazine, that was something I was paying attention to. And like visually the show looks really good. Um, I love that little moment where you see Rio like scratch open like the wallpaper, like breaking the dimension. Like, I thought that looked really cool. Um, I think also it's fun with Wicked coming out this year. There was a little bit of a nod to Wicked as well, which was fun. Um, Gosh, there. I mean, like, again, it was just such a blast, but it also was really interesting to see how they set up Wiccan's character and him, creating the road, and also like Agatha and the whole history behind the witch's road and her like creating it for her, you know, the whole and that whole backstory, which was really yeah, all that was really, really beautiful. And Catherine Kahn did a good job because it is comedy, but there's also, you know, some drama moments there. And I think getting an actress who can do both, just yeah, it was a good time. And again, like I think there's lots of different tones happening. There's the comedy, there's some of the scary, there's some of the drama. And it is like there's some romance as well. Like it is just a very just well like there like just it's I love productions like that that just kind of give you a little bit of everything, and I feel like that's what this show was. Again, like it was something that I don't think you necessarily needed in the MCU, but it was something that was fun to watch.
Yeah,
like
it definitely didn't feel like it belonged in the MCU. It definitely felt like it was its own little thing. And once again, the one thing that really upsets me was the fact that before this show came out, there was so much, you know, there was so much buzz around it. And unfortunately, you know, certain people feel certain ways. And like, of course, one of the showrunners or one of the people on the show just has to drop that one line that gets everybody in an upheaval. Like when they say this is going to be the gayest show in the MCU, just to give the other side a stir. It's just like, please stop. You know, seriously, I'm getting sick and tired of this. I don't care about people being gay or straight in the show. If it's written well and it's got good casting in it, I don't care. You know, just give me something that I can enjoy. And that's one thing that everybody on all sides wants, but everybody being human just likes to piss everybody off. And I'm sick of it.
Yeah, I will say on that, like I do think, you know, and Naughty Back Taco, like representation is super important, and I think Marvel has been doing a good job of, you know, bringing in and telling different people's stories. Like again, like having, you know, Alakwa Cox in the show who is, you know, an amputee and is, you know, using ASL. Like that's, you know, important to see for audiences, you know, to see themselves reflected in media. Like I'm always a big believer in that. But I also think there's a way to do it that's natural and authentic,
Exactly.
and is the fact that, you know, we're all human beings, and that, you know, treating it with, because I think sometimes we will call out and be like, here, you know, this show's queer or this show's this, and it's like I think I feel like it's, you know, we're still at a point where we need to sort of call attention to those things, but I think we want to, or at least the idea is to get to a point where it's like we don't have to call attention to these things, because that type of representation should just be normal. You know, people of all different creeds should be able to see themselves reflected in media.
This is why I always say that the internet is the greatest blessing and the greatest curse. And the reason why it's the greatest curse is because there's so many ways that you can find out about things happening before they happen. And I feel that's really what's ruining entertainment. The fact that there are so many blogs and possible interpretations before everything comes out. I'm like, we need to go back to a time where nobody had that power anymore. You know, like I know it's never going to happen, but it's just like, if we didn't have the internet, these types of shows would come out and we would just let the chips fall where they may. And people would have their opinions after the show came out. But the most important thing is we would go in blind. We wouldn't know anything about the show or the movie or whatever. And then once we walked out of the theater or turned off the television set, then we would have our opinions and have our discussions around the water cooler at work. It doesn't work like that anymore. And I feel that that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, particularly for this show, weirdly, like I wasn't one of these people, but I did hear about it, like got spoiled for the Wiccan reveal, which maybe a lot of people just in hindsight, like knowing the show and what it was, knew that that was probably going to be coming, but that there was, you know, like because of the Funko Pops, I believe, and them being put out distributed too early. Yeah, that those like that people ended up getting spoiled for that, which is just so weird. But you know, I've been in that camp before as someone who loves Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like one of the funniest things I think about that show is that it had 7 whole seasons, and then an intern like the week of the finale like dropped a whole bunch of like press photos for the finale and gave away some major major spoilers from the series finale, which anyone who was watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and was like there as that show was airing knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that just like I will never not find that funny, because it's just crazy to me that you like that could happen. But I mean, yeah, that is like a big curse of the internet and the social media landscape that we're living in, is that it's, I think, very difficult to just enjoy media in its present form, because there is everyone who wants to chime in with a commentary and opinion, and there's people who are a part of the press and the media too, who get to see the episodes early, and so they put their thoughts out early, and some people handle that better than others in terms of spoiling people for things and putting out more than they should. And it's just, it makes like this type of content that does have so much buzz around it so difficult to just enjoy in its, just enjoy as is and have thoughts on it as is, because also a lot of these productions are the ones that will sometimes get review bombed, and it's just, it does make it a lot more difficult to enjoy the like comic movies and TV shows, because there
Yeah.
is just such a massive fan base around them. And I've kind of learned that that's sometimes more of a downside than a positive. And so like, I guess my biggest advice around that is to just like, I've been staying, you know, more and more so like away from social media and different like fandom landscapes, and just getting to watch stuff and enjoy it, and like paying less and less attention to all of those thoughts, so that I'm not feeling influenced to perceive something or see something a certain way, or find out again about something ahead of time and be spoiled for something.
Yeah.
Like I want to just enjoy,
Yeah,
watch
because
and
like
enjoy.
Rotten Tomatoes is like a cancer, because like the minute they see something that gets like certified fresh, and then the fans all hate it, or when the critics just hate something and the fans think it's the greatest thing in the world, and oh man, social media has a frenzy. Enough. That's all I'm gonna say. And unfortunately, we have to sort of take this whole conversation into the next discussion that we're going to go into, which is the animation that we got this year. Now, there was controversy around this specific show, but the thing was, not that many people really cared because of what the show was, and that was X-Men 97. Now, I want to ask you this question. Did you watch or find a way to watch the original animated series from 1992?
I have not watched it yet, but I want to get into it because I did have fun watching X-Men 97. This is a whole world that is so new to me, because I think, when did the, I will say, as it pertains to the X-Men just in general, and obviously we'll you know, dive into this a little bit more as we talk about our film, but I believe I'm trying to look. Yeah, so the first X-Men movie, like the live action movie, came out in
2000.
I want to find a specific date, 2000. Yeah, so it came out a few months before I was born. So these movies predate me. So that's like that's going to be now 25 years old this year, so that's crazy. But it's to say that there's like a whole history and a world there that I need to dive into. But I think I watched X-Men Origins Wolverine. That was one of the ones I've watched, and then I watched Logan. And I think that's all I've watched in the X-Men world. Or maybe I watched no, I watched X-Men Origins Wolverine, because that was the one that Ryan Reynolds was in. Yes. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I've been slowly wading into the world of the X-Men, and I think 2025 will be the year that I start to get catched up a little bit more on all of that. You know, kind of more ingratiated.
Actually, I don't think I ever asked you this question before. Do you actually dive into the comic books? Do you like dabble in them?
I would like to. I think it's like, I've always been more of a novel reader and a book reader, and so like comics, and even like it's like, even I started reading, like, again, because the Heartstopper show became so popular, reading those, which are like, you know, visual media, and it's always been weirdly like a space I haven't dabbled in a lot. And I think I would like to read more of the comic books. I think it's just knowing where to start, because there's so many of them, and also just knowing like what would be best. So that's definitely a like space that I have not fully tapped into yet, because I also just never really thought I would be interested in like comic book like movies or TV shows, and so that's even still a whole world that I'm like wading into. I'm still currently because of a friend, like watching the Arrowverse shows and diving into those still for the first time. So there's like, again, I'm like, I think the stories that are told in that world are so fun. And again, like I'm an only child, so a lot of times I have to just discover and find media on my own. So I kind of in like just figuring out more of what my interests and preference are. But I want to get more into comics for
So
sure.
do yourself a favor, talk to me and the people of That's Comical more often. Oh man, can we help you? Because just also know that I may be someone that read comics for a while, but I'm still not as versed as so many other people out there. But a lot of the people that are on That's Comical staff are also relatively new. And all that people who are big X-Men fans on this channel will only say one thing: just Google the following name, Chris Claremont, and you'll read the greatest X-Men stories of all time. He
Amazing.
is the person who wrote X-Men from the late 1970s until 1990. And he is the inspiration for everything that you see in film for X-Men. He is the inspiration for the original animated series, the inspiration for X-Men 97. Just about every single storyline that's pulled straight from the comics are from his stories. Such an amazing writer. Someone who actually has come to my local comic book store for signings, but I had not been there for an opportunity. But I would love to meet the man
One day.
because he was in comics at the right time. He he's the one who wrote the well-known, even people who never read the comic books, you hear the words the Dark Phoenix saga, you know what people are talking about. He wrote that. So he also had two brilliant editors along with him, Louise Simonson and Ann Nocenti. Yes, two women, and they are two of the greatest people in comic books. I actually met Louise Simonson and her husband Walter, who was writing Thor back in the 80s. They are two of the sweetest people I've ever met. It was such an honor to meet them. But the thing that was so amazing was how much they love comics and how much they love reading them and writing them. And that's what makes great comic books.
That's what you need
So
more of in the industry for sure.
yes. So X-Men 97, like I said, let's go back to when I was 10 years old. That was when Batman the Animated Series has already had its first season, and the same channel gave us X-Men the Animated Series, and that show just blew my mind because it was everything I wanted. It was the X-Men that I loved. They were in the costumes that I saw right out of the comic books, and I just had a blast. When I found out that they were making a brand new show, was I nervous? Yes, I was, because I had no idea what was going to happen, or this guy, Bo DeMeo, who was in charge of it. And then I started reading up on him when his controversy dropped. The fact that they fired him because he had an OnlyFans account. Well,
Interesting.
you see, the thing is, yes, I know what people think of when you hear the words OnlyFans. But the truth of the matter is, yes, while large people use OnlyFans for a certain kind of entertainment, and not everybody uses OnlyFans for that entertainment. So we don't really know what he even had an OnlyFans account for. But they said, this is not right. This is not family friendly. You're fired. And when he was doing the show running for X-Men 97, he specifically brought writers and artists onto his staff who read the comics, and if they didn't know the comics, were willing to learn through the comics. Like, he really wanted fans who knew these characters to make this follow-up to this beloved 90s animated show. I'm just going to say this right off the bat. That show did gangbusters. I mean, they're still saying that for some strange reason that didn't get the viewership that it wanted. I call BS on that because everyone I knew who knew that it existed all watched it and all loved it. It was a phenomenally good show. I was so glad
The
to see it
animation is
back.
beautiful. It's gorgeous. Like it's so vivid and brightly covered. Like it was just because again, like even animated shows are sort of a new thing for me. Because it's just again, it's just a landscape I haven't tapped into, but I always love just like discovering new media because I find that I just like if it's done well, I love storytelling in all forms. Um but it's just finding the right ones, that'll pique my interest. And the animation is so beautiful. It's so vivid, and I love like all the color. Like it's very different animation from What If too. Like it's also very, two different, radically different animation styles.
And more importantly, how awesome is that theme song?
It's fun. Yeah, it's a bop. But you
Great?
can't skip it. It's good.
You want
it's
you
awesome.
want a little fun fact about that song? That was the
Please.
song that I specifically told the DJ who DJ'd my wedding to play to announce my wife and I coming out onto the dance floor as husband and wife for the first time.
That's awesome. Also, was there, because I'm thinking about this now, looking back, when Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness came out, and there was that cameo, that X-Men cameo. Did they use the 97?
Yeah. So when Professor Xavier rolls out in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, when Kamala is told by Bruno that there's something in her genes like a mutation, yes, in those two moments you hear the X-Men theme song in the background.
Yes. Yeah, that was one of the things I remember, that I may have not been privy to as I was watching it, but I do remember hearing about it, and I'm like, I think that's a fun nod. So,
but these characters are so loved, and they truly didn't miss a beat. They definitely improved in some areas too, because in the original series, a lot of people did not really enjoy Cyclops, but Cyclops in this brand new show is dynamite. I love the opening. I love the first episode when he does like a dive towards the ground and he uses his optic blast to give himself his own Iron Man landing, and then he goes, "To me, my X-Men." Like, that was beautiful.
So
but
that phrase is used a lot in the show too, like my
X-Men, because that's an iconic X-Men line.
Yeah.
But what I also loved about this was that Bo DeMeo and everybody behind this show basically said, yes, this is an animated show, but this is not a kid's show. This is a show for the kids who grew up with the 1992 show, and we want to give them something fresh. And oh boy, did they give us something fresh, especially in episode 4 with Gambit.
Yes. Oh gosh, Gambit was fun. I think because I watched this just recently. So I watched it after watching Deadpool and Wolverine. So I feel like I had more an appreciation for Gambit as a character because of that, which again we'll dive into. But that Gambit was definitely, I think, my favorite in the show. I had fun with him. But all of them are really great. It's a fun story,
and that story in which Gambit unfortunately deals with his untimely demise. This is not a spoiler. Everybody knows about this. That story is taken right out of the comics. It's not written by Chris Claremont. It was actually a story that came out in the early 2000s called E is for Extinction, where Genosha is basically ambushed and like millions of mutants lose their lives. It was a very powerful moment in the comics.
The end of that episode is devastating.
Written by a man named Grant Morrison. It was just, it was heartbreaking, but at the same time, as a fan, I'm just like, wow, they just paid tribute to E is for Extinction. Or the whole situation that Jean Grey has in that show, that comes right out of Chris Claremont's iconic story Inferno with the Goblin Queen. This was just like they did it in the 1992 series, pulling stories right out of the comics and giving it its own television interpretation. It was perfect. I loved the new show. I'm so upset it's not on physical media right now, because I don't have that many TV shows that I grew up with in physical media, but I have all 5 seasons of X-Men 92. And I watched them and I love them. And I want X-Men 97 on physical media so badly.
I'm curious whether they will, because I know some of the Disney Plus shows, the Marvel Disney Plus shows, have been getting physical media releases. Kind of like it takes about a year after they've been released, because I think they just put out the one for Loki season 2.
They did.
So I'm curious, and especially also like now that What If is wrapped up, all 3 seasons, like if they
will they make like a whole box set?
Yeah, something like that. Like I am curious, like what they would do with physical media, regarding some of their animated shows. But yeah, you brought up that episode with Jean Grey. I think that's the 3rd episode. Was that episode? I think that was the moment where I was like fully sucked in for the first time watching the show, because I was like, wow, like this animation is beautiful. That episode's also very haunting. It's definitely, like you mentioned, having some scarier moments like that. I was like, whoa. Um, and it's, yeah, again, like the whole show is someone who is not as familiar with the X-Men and those like sort of wading into this world for the first time. Um, like it sold me. Like I'm excited to get to dive
Yeah.
more into the X-Men and
So
get to like learn more about the character, like really get to fully dive into that world, because I feel like they're slowly introducing a lot of people to it,
yes,
and building up the
exactly.
fact that like all of these pieces are coming together, right? Like we have all of the MCU and everything we've done, but we also have the Fantastic Four, we have the X-Men, like we're just building this whole massive
And
expansive
there's certain characters that got really great opportunities to shine. And these are some characters that didn't even get that many opportunities in the live action Bryan Singer X-Men films. Like in this show, there's some great moments with Nightcrawler. And Nightcrawler is such an amazing character. I also love the history behind Nightcrawler. When Chris Claremont took Nightcrawler, he's like, why do demons all have to be scary and why do they have to be ugly? Let's make the most freakish looking mutant the most genuine and generous that they ever could do. That's why Nightcrawler is such a fan favorite amongst many. Jubilee is one of my favorites. She is such
She's
a
so fun.
highlight. She's a
I
highlight
loved
in the
that
original show.
Motendo episode, that like chunk of
Yes,
the
with
episode
Mojo. Yeah.
was really fun. Like that was a good time. But also like contrasted with then like Storm and Forge's storyline. Like those are two like very radically different stories, and
That
pairing them
comes
together I thought
right
was
out of the
interesting.
comics, by the way.
Yeah. Those are that was very, very fun, and I loved like that little story, especially because yes, do you see Storm in What If Part 2? Yes?
Of
No?
course you did.
Yes.
In season three, sure you do.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So that was also fun too.
No,
Um,
let me explain something to you about that story. I'm glad you brought that one up because that was one of Chris Claremont's major things that he did in regards to his storytelling. He's like, it's great to tell an epic story with a lot of action and a lot of life and death moments, but at the same time, we need to have those real quiet stories because what it does is it builds character and it really brings the reader into these characters' lives and really makes, because that was why Chris Claremont was such a great writer, because he made people truly relate to these characters and made people really want to learn about these characters behind the mask and not just what they did. Another thing that a lot of people give Chris Claremont credit, he wrote very powerful female characters, some of the greatest
yes.
female characters in comics, because his attitude was every single time he was going to use a new character or create a new character, he always asked the question, can this character be female? That's what he said. They don't always have to be male. That's why we have Rogue
Love
and
that.
Jubilee and Storm. I mean, Jean Grey was there since 1963, but we have so many. That's why the X-Men are so popular, because there's a little something for everyone. There's a character that everyone can relate to. I mean, she's not in the show, but there's a character that was created named Kitty Pryde. And this was a character that Chris Claremont created out of his own life. He created an openly young Jewish superhero that
That's
he
awesome.
can really relate to. And if it wasn't for that character, we never would have had the issue, X-Men issue 150, where we got Magneto's backstory and we found out that he actually is not necessarily a bad guy. He has this attitude because the Nazis killed his family in the Holocaust. So it's amazing what he did. And it's just amazing how the X-Men are still very much beloved, especially people, even though the X-Men are not really doing so well right now in the comics, when people get upset, others basically say, "Oh, just go read Chris Claremont's books. Just read his books. You'll love the X-Men again. Trust me, trust me, trust me." And they're not wrong. They are some of the greatest books ever written, and some of the greatest characters that we've ever received.
Yeah. I loved too what they did with Magneto. I think that was a really, really fun character.
Yes,
And it was, yeah, that whole storyline was
because
interesting too.
because that's exactly what, again, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but again, this came right out of the comics, issue 200, The Trial of Magneto. And eventually, Professor X would just be gone somewhere. And he had to step up and take over the school. He was the guy who took care of the New Mutants for a while. I mean, the New Mutants. Speaking of the New Mutants, we also had Roberto. He's supposed to be eventually become his own superhero. He's supposed to be the hero Sunspot.
Yes.
So many great characters. And again, yes, what they did with Magneto was great because even in the original show, Magneto was always looked at as the big baddie, but at the same time, they specifically made sure that we knew that he and Charles Xavier had a relationship, a truly positive friendship, and they just didn't agree and they went off their beaten paths. But they always made it known that no, there's more to Magneto. He's not just a villain. There's more to him. There's so much gray. It's not black and white. And X-Men 97 really expanded upon that and took it to the next level, just like the comics did as the stories moved on.
Yeah. Magneto feels a lot like X-Men's version of Loki because I love Loki, so I will find a way to bring that character up if I can. Yeah. And I love characters in stories like that where because people aren't just all black or white, like they are, morally gray. And also I think it's just a super important message in today's society that like you can have different viewpoints on things or different approaches on things but still be able to coexist with people. I think there's a lot of people who feel alienated from the world or just from even people in their own family or friends because maybe they have a different view on something or have a different, and it's just like we're in a very tumultuous period of time, and so it feels like the story is almost is necessary, I think, because of that, to be able to show people coexisting and being able to navigate having different views on things or different approaches for how a certain situation should be handled, and exploring those complexities.
I'm hoping that we get another season of X-Men 97. It really
feels
was
like
wonderful.
They set it up for it with that ending.
They really should. It is wonderful. And again, I highly recommend you go check out the original series. It's so wonderful. If you love 97, you're going to love 92. That's all that I'm going to say. But
yes.
Then we were given a big surprise before the year was over, and we got the final season of What If. So this was an interesting one for me because I think what they tried to do was let's give the fans some really out there ideas and some truly crazy stories. And I will say there were some stories that we got that were just, I did not expect that. The whole situation with the Avengers turning into a giant Gundam-like robot, the whole episode with Agatha and Kingo, that was so out of left field, but it was like so funny and so off color. But my favorite episode, and it's no surprise to me because it's based on a comic book, was 1872.
Nice.
I love the Old West episode. It's very different from the comic, but what I loved so much about it was, oh my God, Kate Bishop and Shang-Chi in the Wild
That was a fun pairing.
That was a great idea. And then you got that little surprise at the very end with the little boy who is apparently going to be the Iron Fist. I loved it. That was such a great, again, I loved in the second season, I loved the episode 1602, which is directly off the Neil Gaiman book. But 1872 is based on the 5-issue miniseries from Jerry Duggan, and it was fun. It was great. And I also loved the idea of superheroes in the Wild West because DC has their own thing with Jonah Hex and all of that stuff. But I will say that there were a couple of things that were a little over the top. But overall, I had a good time with it. And yes, I did love the episode with Howard the Duck because...
Yes, that episode, I think I told you, was my favorite because it was so fun. I was like, I very much went into the episode and I was like, oh, Darcy and Howard the Duck getting married. Like, again, I feel like What If is just an excuse for them to plug Howard the Duck wherever they possibly
I say the exact same thing.
But that episode I just had fun with. I think also, like, again, a lot of that is personal. Like, I wouldn't even say it's the best episode of this season. I mean, it's definitely not, but it's my favorite because also as someone who loves Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., who loves Loki, like getting to see Clark Gregg and Tom Hiddleston return to that episode, I was like, I'm here for it. I'm having fun. I'm having a good
Well, I
time.
mean, Seth Green and Kat Dennings had so much chemistry.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's like it's also with James Gunn. It's like I want to find I wish if I had the opportunity to meet the creators of What If, I just want to ask them, are you guys basically putting Howard the Duck in here just to tell people we forgive Marvel for making such a horrible movie in 1986 and that we love Howard the Duck and that Howard the Duck should have his own TV series or his own movie done right? Like, I love Howard the Duck too. I really do.
I think
And
it's a fun way to give nod to that character in a way that's
I
very
do.
unserious and is, to give love to that character and just give it like it fit like Howard the Duck is a character that fits in What If very, very well. So it makes sense
Exactly.
to if you want to give love to that character for the cult fan base that it has, that's a great way to do it.
And then and then we got the last two episodes. I mean, it was definitely cool to see Storm. It was really cool to see Storm, hear the X-Men theme again, have the voice of Storm from the original show back to voice her in this story. And it was also very interesting to see Kahori come back.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also really cool to see another brand new character who happened to be the daughter of Howard the Duck and Darcy, which I thought was pretty cool. She does go by Darcy Duck now. I
Love
think.
it.
But I mean, like, the last two episodes were extremely action packed. I think it might have been a little too much for me.
It was a very, I think, like, I mean, if you're wrapping up the show and you're giving it a series finale, you need to go out on a high note. And I think it is interesting because the Watcher has kind of sort of been the one telling, all of these stories. And so to kind of then turn it around and make the story about him and kind of give more of an emphasis on like what it means to be a watcher and what it means to be an observer and when do you intervene, because that's kind of sort of the similar questions that we asked with the Eternals too, is like all this shit has been going on in the MCU and like now we're finally getting the Eternal story and like why didn't they intervene right when like Endgame was happening? Like that's a big question a lot of people have. And so I think like I thought those last two episodes were like, again, like you said, very, very action packed. I think it was a good way to kind of like, if you're gonna, because then it's like, how do you, because the show in and of itself feels very episodic and that like each episode can very much stand apart on its own, but also they were kind of threading an overarching through line. So in it as well at the same time. So it's like, how do you wrap that up? Because you could have like 10 plus seasons of that show. There's countless stories, you could come up with. So how do you wrap it up in 3 seasons? And I think it was it was a very, very action-packed ending. And I think I just liked getting to see the Watcher in action and get to also learn his name.
You love Jeffrey Wright as voicing.
I love Jeffrey Wright. So I was excited for more Jeffrey Wright and just to be able to like really put a spotlight on his character. And learn more about like his history, like becoming the Watcher, like getting to learn more about that character.
It was definitely something that a lot of people were looking forward to. People seemed to really enjoy it. I personally think it was one of the stronger projects on the Disney Plus front for the MCU. And, I wouldn't have done anything differently. I feel that the way that it ended was exactly how it should have ended. I also really appreciated that it basically ended sort of where it started with Captain Carter, which I also thought was really nice to see.
I feel like that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some good moments, and as a whole, I think the show is pretty darn good, considering the fact that there has been so much negativity with some of the other projects that have come out around the time that these shows were coming out. It is nice to see one that really does connect with people. And I also have to give the show props because it did bring back What If to the pages of comics. I'm not reading them, but I know that they're out there right now. There are What If titles. And just like the third season, they're really pulling some strange ideas out of their butts. But you know what? That's what If is all about.
Yeah, I feel like, again, like the possibilities are endless for what you can do with that show. So I'm surprised they wrapped it up after 3 seasons, but also like, I think that's fitting. I don't think you don't need the project to go on for that long, but I had fun with this project. Like, it was one that I wasn't sure, like, going into it in the very beginning, like how I was going to feel about it. And I think it's just fun to be able to take, the actors that are in the MCU and do something animated as well. So you're introducing that movie, comic going audience to a different form of storytelling. And it is just fun to play around with those characters. Like, I mean, you brought up the episode from the second season that's set in the 1600s, and like, Tom Hiddleston being a Shakespearean actor as he is, to get to see Loki as Shakespeare, like, that's just so fun. Like, it is just like the possibilities are endless for what you can do in the stories you can tell. And I feel like I'm gonna miss it. I hope, like I said, like I mentioned this before when we've talked about earlier seasons of What If, that I would love to see Uatu, get to see the Watcher, like, in the live action. And I feel like also for people who love Captain Carter, like, this felt like a very Captain Carter focused story, which I think was interesting as well.
It's also really great that a large chunk of the actors reprised their roles in animation form and lend their voices to these characters. Yeah. It was great to see Tom Hiddleston come back and Anthony Mackie come back, Seth Green come back, Haley Atwell constantly voicing her character. Just having all of these actors come back to voice their characters again. It's getting David Harbour back, Sebastian Stan, like everybody that they could get back would be willing to come back. And that was really powerful, I think.
Yeah, it's very fun. Yeah, because we didn't talk about that. That Red Guardian and Winter Soldier episode felt very fun with Thunderbolts coming up. I enjoyed the two of them together, so now that just makes me so much more excited for Thunderbolts, seeing the two of them.
And again, the 1872 episode, getting Simu Liu and Haley Steinfeld and Walton Goggins to voice his character from Ant-Man in that episode. That was great. I love all of those actors. But so now we go into the theatrical releases, and we only got one. And I am just going to say the following. I am hoping that the Disney executives are counting their blessings as much as they possibly can, because they had one shot to make bank this year in the theaters. Thank God they didn't. And of course, that is Deadpool and Wolverine, also known as Deadpool 3, starring Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. I mean,
yes, Marvel Jesus. So fun. So fun. I had the best time. I had a blast.
I was very excited for this movie to come out, but at the same time, I could understand why there were so many people that were going to be so skeptical about this, because, oh man, another reason why I hate the internet, all the speculation, like, oh, are they really going to keep this movie rated R? Are they really going to bring Hugh Jackman back? Is this really going to be a successful film? Like, there was so many people that were trying. It's kind of upsetting to know that there were so many people that, to a certain degree, wanted this movie to fail because they just hate Disney and Marvel so much right now. But I'm sorry. When Ryan Reynolds is coming back to make this film and Deadpool is very much his Marvel baby, there is no way in hell he was going to let anybody screw this up,
And him and Hugh Jackman have such a great friendship. Like, as much as I had fun watching the movie, the press tour was also equally fun as well. Just watching the two of them, like, have fun promoting the movie. Like, they are such a iconic Hollywood friendship and have such a long friendship that seeing that then come to the screen, obviously, like, yes, the two of them were in the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie together, and that sort of kicked off Deadpool. But I feel like this, like, especially after everything that happened with Logan, like, seeing Hugh Jackman then come back as Wolverine, like, there was so much. I think there was a lot of anticipation around this movie, and also just interesting is to see, when I think about 2024 as a year, like, this movie, I think, made a significant cultural impact too. Like, you're not listening to like Madonna's like a prayer. Like you're not listening to like some even the music in this movie, like you're not listening to it the same way anymore. And it took songs that were once super popular and kind of now when you listen to those songs, like you only think I feel like I think about Deadpool and Wolverine a lot, especially that
Um,
intro. Oh my
you know,
God.
I completely forgot about that whole thing with Madonna. This is actually an interesting thing that I learned about this movie. So, of course, if you're going to put music in your movies, you've got to get the copyrights.
Right.
Ryan Reynolds literally begged Madonna to get this song into his movie, and he literally came to her house and he showed her the test footage of where her song was going to be showing up in the movie. And while she's watching, she goes, "No, it needs to be done this way." And then she says, "Trust me, it will work." And that's why we got what we got for her song, you
Oh,
know?
it's so good. Theirs was a funny trend. I mean, it goes around every year, but it's like play for media, like play this media at this point in time to have this happen as the clock hits midnight. And I
Mhm.
saw a video of someone playing Deadpool and Wolverine at midnight, so that then when "Like a Prayer" by Madonna plays and Hugh Jackman's shirt just rips off, that's what kicks off your 2025. And I was like, that's it's a good way to start the year.
But at the same time, of course, one of the other things that that a couple of people were screaming about was, "Oh, you're just catering to the fanboys." I'm like, damn straight they are, because
Fan service is good when it's done well. Like there's bad
and
fan service, but there's also really good fan service where it's just fun and it's an acknowledgement and appreciation. Like you could say that the most recent Spider-Man movie had a whole bunch of fan service in it with the amount of cameos and appearances and everything that they brought in, but it's also just like a love letter to Spider-Man and all of those movies. Like fan service is I will never complain about fan service if it's done well.
yeah, I mean, I
And
still
it was
heard
done
this.
well here.
I heard this story that just made me laugh so much. Apparently, there were a bunch of Jesus freaks that got so offended by the scene when Deadpool was jumping into different dimensions looking for different Wolverines, and there was the scene where he actually sees that one Wolverine like Jesus on a
Yes.
giant X, and I'm like saying to myself, "Oh my God, did you ever see the comic cover? That is a iconic Mark Silvestri comic cover from the late 80s. Like, that's not Jesus. That's just a tribute to the comic book." Or like
Right. Or even just the
comic
phrase Marvel Jesus, which was used a lot in the
comic
movie. It's just
comic accurate Wolverine. The scene where he flashes his claws and the Hulk is right behind him. That's right off of a comic cover of a Hulk comic from the late 1980s. It's worth a ton of money right now, as a matter of fact. And that's why everybody's like saying, "Oh, will there please be a Wolverine and Hulk movie?" As there should be, because Wolverine fought the Hulk in his very first appearance in the comic books. But I also love the fact that in that scene he goes, "Oh, John Byrne uniform with the yellow and tan." I'm like, "Oh my God, he's even mentioning the writer." I love that. The
yeah, it's
scene
very fun.
where the scene where that scene where he finds the Logan with the one arm in that apocalyptic world that comes right out of the comic book story Age of Apocalypse, where Wolverine actually has only one hand. I'm like, that was I was crying. My inner child was so happy to see all of that stuff. And just being with the power of love by Huey Lewis and the News being played during that entire scene. That was so hilarious. But I loved the fact that they actually roped the TVA into this story, but it made so much
Yes.
sense for it to do so. Would it have been nice to, well, you know what? Now it actually makes sense as to why we didn't see Loki, because we now know where Loki is. But
Yeah, no, Loki
getting
couldn't show up.
yeah, but getting Mr. Paradox into it was definitely an interesting twist.
And they had
And
Woomy show up. That was very exciting. I was kind of like waiting on that. I was like, if they're gonna bring in the TVA, I was like curious how much of like the Loki TV show they were gonna reference as well. And I think having Woomy show up, as from her character as Loki was great. Like I think that was just a really nice nod to that world because obviously, you're not gonna have Tom Hiddleston show up. Um,
exactly. I just
and
love when they saw a gigantic purple monitor. Like, oh my God, from Loki season one. Like,
I know I loved it. I was so happy when I heard that.
but
I was like,
But, like what Spider Man No Way Home did for all the Spider Man movies of the past, what we got in Deadpool and Wolverine was pure gold
It was
because
amazing.
this movie was also a beautiful send off to all of the Fox movies.
Yes, that ending too. Like I think it's the credits. That's really that was yeah, that was beautiful.
Because that scene where Chris Evans shows up, you know?
Oh, so good. That was my favorite. That was
Now let me
I
ask you a question. Did you see that movie before you saw
Yes,
this?
yes, yes, yeah. I watched both of Chris Evans' Fantastic Four movies.
I love those
Um,
movies, by
so
the
I
way.
knew a
They're
lot of
wonderful.
people talked about him like coming back as Johnny Storm, and I think like again talking about fan service, they sort of did the same thing with Multiverse of Madness with John Krasinski. Yes, like his little cameo because a lot of people wanted him, like a way to acknowledge like what it is that the audience wants and create a little bubble for that, but also then be able to, take like the actual Fantastic Four that they're doing
But it
and
was
cast an
just
actual
so
actor for it. It's a way
but
to
it was
give
just
credence
so
to that.
amazing to see Vinnie Jones reprise his role as the Juggernaut. We had Nate Park came back as Toad. Tyler
Wesley
Mane.
Snipes?
Okay, we were just about
Holy
to get into
shit!
that. That was the cameo that did it for me. Forget the fact that they got Jennifer Garner back as Elektra. I mean, it would have been so much better if they would have actually were able to get Ben Affleck back as Daredevil. That would have been even crazier. But yeah, getting Wesley Snipes to reprise his role as Blade, that was something I did not see coming. But I do understand why he's there because Ryan Reynolds was in the third Blade film. And that is why the scene where Wesley Snipes says, I don't like you. And then Deadpool goes, you never did. Because they really did not like each other on set. But how about the fact that Channing Tatum played Gambit?
Yeah, so I learned a little bit more about the history of that. I think maybe I heard a little bit about it before the movie came out because they did the Comic-Con panel. And so I think I heard a little bit about that. And I just like that made it more fun. And oh my gosh, the line about the minions, oh my gosh, like the dialogue of that was so good.
And
Yeah,
and
it
of
was fun.
course, getting Daphne Keene back to reprise her role as X-23. And the fact that she's actually not, that she's still there at the very end of the movie, does this mean she's going to be joining the Young Avengers? Like, what does
That
this
would be
mean,
fun.
you know? But
Yeah.
no, there was so much to love about this movie. And there's even, if you also look hard enough, there was one Easter egg that I knew about going into the movie. And it was actually during the Like a Prayer scene. It's the scene where Wolverine puts on the mask. And of course, everybody goes crazy because he puts on the mask. But they're standing in front of a place called Liefeld's Shoe Store. What's so
Mm,
interesting about that is the person who created Deadpool is an artist named Rob Liefeld, and his biggest problem is he can't draw feet.
that's funny.
So when
Right.
people actually saw Liefeld, and it was in the trailers too, when people actually noticed that, people thought that was one of the funniest things ever. And then, of course, also getting Blake Lively in the movie
Yes.
too. There was just so much to love and so much great fan service, and it just worked. It all worked. And the best part was it really did. It really was a rated R movie. They didn't hold anything back.
Yeah, and so like I mean, oh gosh, there's so much to like add to that. For people that were like, the Marvel Jesus, like all of that not, it's like if you've watched the first two Deadpool movies, like Ryan Reynolds is not like he goes places with the Deadpool films. Like it's not, if you're easily offended, these are not movies for you to watch. Because they're like very beginning, just like wild. But they are so fun to watch. And God oh my gosh, what else was I gonna say? I mean, speaking of cameo, like God, there's so many cameos in this movie too. Like we didn't even touch on that scene, which I didn't know anything about going in because I did hear about Chris Evans, so I was bummed that I didn't get to enjoy that when that happened. Which, by the way, I loved that end credits scene. God, that was so funny. I
That was
loved his
really
Chris
fun.
Evans because so many people know him as Captain America that to watch him pop off and just like
That's
just
what he used
swear.
to. That's the thing. When Chris
Great.
Evans was starting, that's what he was. He was the bad
Yeah.
boy.
And I think after people like, and because Knives Out happened after, you know, he departed as Captain America, that people started to see more of that side of him. But just again, get to do that with Johnny Storm, like get to just, oh, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved all of his
No,
appearances. So good.
I love watching fan reactions. The minute he says "flame on," I'm like, oh god, you
So
guys have,
good.
unless you watch the Fantastic Four, you have no idea.
But oh my gosh, we didn't talk about John Favreau. John Favreau shows up in this movie as Happy Hogan, which was
Exactly.
exciting too. That was very, very fun. That was a good scene.
Yeah.
And I was psyched when I saw him. I was like, ah.
Yeah, and I also kind of loved how there were so many great meta moments, and I was like, and here is Wolverine. He's gonna play Wolverine till he's 90. Like,
90. That's so good. I love the way he said
it's so
90.
funny considering how many years it has been since we first discovered Hugh Jackman because he played Wolverine in 2000. Considering the fact that he was playing this character for 24 years.
Yeah.
And the fact
That's the thing, is a lot of people were worried, like, is this film going to be, because you know, like, obviously, you know, Hugh Jackman had his departure as Wolverine and Logan, and they're like, is
this is
this
a great
movie going to like ruin the, you know, significance of that or the impact of that? And then you just have the very first scene of the movie, which is set to Bye 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 by NSYNC, and that was also a whole moment of everyone learning the choreography and dance pool, and everyone started to pay more attention to that actor and the choreography he does, and that whole opening credit scene, because the opening credits for Deadpool are always so fun.
It's great.
And
I love them.
That was, it was just so good. That was a blast. And there are, again, so many other nods. One of the other ones I loved that I have to mention as a theater person is I loved, and a lot of people wanted more of it. And as much as like I felt this way too, I also was like, I feel like just what they included was enough, and I feel like any more and it would have been a little bit obnoxious. But there's that scene where they're absolutely brawling in the car, and I think they hit the radio, and at one point The Greatest Showman comes on, and I'm like,
yes.
I was like, this is great.
There's so many great nods, so many great Easter eggs. It really was. It was the movie that we needed in 2024. You know, it was just so nice that, you know, we didn't have so many truly great box office hits.
Right.
But, you know, when we got Deadpool and Wolverine, and then a little bit later we would get Inside Out 2, you know, we got some of those truly great pre-pandemic box office numbers that we had not seen in a couple of years. And it was just nice to see that those numbers, of course, were being held by the types of films that were holding those kinds of box office numbers beforehand. The Disney animated / Pixar animated films, the Marvel movies. It's a shame that I don't know if we're ever going to get a Star Wars movie like that anymore. I mean, I will say that I did actually watch Skeleton Crew, and it was the first time in a long time that I've actually enjoyed anything Star Wars in almost 10 years, which is really sad for me. But, you know, this movie was wonderful. It was definitely one of my top 5 films of the year. I think I gave it like a 4 out of 4 because I loved it so much. But, you know, considering that they had that one chance and they got it right, now the question is, what are we going to get in 2025? Because we're definitely getting a little more than just one movie this year. I mean, I will personally say I am excited, even though there's so much negativity around Captain America Brave New World. Mm-hmm. I am personally excited for it. Thunderbolts, not so much, but one of the few things that I have to give Thunderbolts the credit for is that it's taking some of those loose ends and finally putting some of them to good use. It's good to know that U.S. Agent, aka John Walker, is going to be getting a little bit more to his story in Thunderbolts, you know? So it's good to know that he'll be back, along with some of the other characters that we haven't seen in a while. And of course, you know, what everybody is very curious about is Fantastic Four. That's the one that everybody's excited. Everybody's excited and terrified for all at the same time because they just want to see a good Fantastic Four movie. Now, I am going to say I love the Tim Story Fantastic Four movies with Ian Griffold, Chris Evans, Jessica Alba. I love those movies to death. Fan Four Stick, not so much. But as someone who loves the Fantastic Four, I want them to get it right. And I really want them to be a part of the MCU that people want to come back to
Yeah.
and see more of, because the Fantastic Four, their nickname is Marvel's first family. You know, they were the launching pad to what Marvel is today, thanks to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in the early 1960s. There's so much incredible storytelling that the Fantastic Four can give us. They can truly open up the cosmic lore. They're the reason why Uatu is here. So hopefully they'll bring the Watcher back, and hopefully we'll see the coming of Galactus and Silver Surfer done right. But yeah, I mean, I think the big elephant in the room is the fact that they announced Robert Downey Jr. playing Doctor Doom in Secret Wars, and most likely in a couple of films beforehand. But will he play Doctor Doom as well as he played Iron Man? Hell yes, he will. But is this a desperate cry for help? Seriously.
Yeah. So many thoughts. Goodness. Yeah, I will say of the releases next year, I am excited for Thunderbolts probably the most, because I love Sebastian Stan, I love Florence Pugh, and I'm excited to, like I said again with that what if episode, to get to see Red Guardian come back as well. Like, I just love his character. I think he's very fun, and I think I'm always a fan of like an underdog storyline and a bunch of like awkward misfits kind of coming together and kicking ass. Like, I just think it's going to be fun, if it's done well. But again, like, I have low expectations for Marvel, because it's just, again, like, they've opened the door for so many different stories, and it's like, again, like, are they biting off more that they can chew? And so does that then affect the quality of the stories? So, because we are ramping up and obviously releasing more content in 2025 than they did in 2024, and I think it's good. I think, they need to sort of start building momentum back up again. But I do remember when I heard about the Robert Downey Jr. announcement, and I felt very ambivalent about it, because I don't feel like the dust has settled on Iron Man as a character, and obviously that character was what kicked off the entire MCU, right? And Robert Downey Jr. was the whole center of the first wave of the MCU, and now they've kind of been wading the waters into this new chapter, and it does feel like an interesting choice. I think in order to really form opinions on it, I'm just going to have to see how they decide to portray that character and what they decide to do with it. And how they choose to go about it, because I feel like there's no way that they can't acknowledge that, like, oh, Doctor Doom looks exactly like Iron Man. That's like, I feel like there's gonna have to be some level of self-awareness about it, and I don't know. I am wary. It does feel like a bit of a concerning choice. I think Robert Downey Jr. is a phenomenal actor and obviously has a long history with Marvel, and I think like his portrayal won't be an issue, but it's more so how they write the character and what they decide to do with it. And it did just seem like they were setting up Jonathan Majors to be the next big bad, and then that sort of fell apart on them. And so they're like, where do we turn? And now this is what they've done, and I don't know.
Let's not forget that Robert Downey Jr. is now coming back to the MCU, known as Oscar winner Robert Downey Jr. So he's got a couple more accolades under his belt at the moment. So that's why I don't anticipate bad things from him, because he really is a great actor. But again, is there going to be a good story behind all of this, or is Marvel just trying to save itself from itself and everybody around it? We're just going to have to see how this year plays out, because like we said, it's not that we're getting too many films. We're getting 3 films. I don't really know what we're getting in terms of Disney Plus shows. I do know that we are getting that Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man story at the end of January, so I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah,
Although, of course,
Daredevil Born Again is supposed to be coming out. I
Daredevil
don't know
Born
about
Again.
Ironheart. I wrote down, like, I looked up just an article to sort of see like what else was happening. Um, I know they announced Ironheart a while back, so maybe
Yeah.
or maybe not we're getting that. There was something I mentioned about a Wakanda show, a zombie show, and then a Wonder Man show.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
The Wonder Man show. I don't really know how to think about that one, to be honest with you.
and again, I feel like that far out in the year, a lot of that stuff may get pushed or not released. So I feel like more of the focus will be on film than Disney Plus for the
I
year,
think
which is
so.
interesting because I feel like there's been at the very beginning of the year such a heavy emphasis on the Disney Plus shows, and now we're kind of seeing more of a return back to cinema. And I think that, you know, Deadpool and Wolverine preceding that, like being the sort of film that's going to get Marvel audiences back into the cinema, I think is a smart choice because hopefully that'll lead more people to want to go back and sort of see
Well,
some of these next movies. And I think they have it's an interesting slate. And yeah, I think it'll be fun.
the most important thing is that the two of us will definitely be there for it. Definitely going to make sure that I see it. I'm going to do my very best to see all the films in theaters, and I think I'll be able to catch them all in theaters. But yeah, I think that's going to put a wrap on another MCU wrap up discussion with Gabby. So this was definitely fun, as it always has been. It's great to have done this for the 4th time, and I'm looking forward to the 5th one when it does happen next year. But ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between, we really hope you enjoyed. So don't forget to leave a comment and a like. I'd love to have a discussion with you. I'm sure Gabby would like to as well. There's
Yes.
so many great things coming on this channel at That's Comical. I mean, if you guys are already subscribed and hitting that notification bell, you've probably already seen the 2 videos that have already popped up, and a 3rd one is about to drop in just a couple of days. And then there's a couple of other projects in the works. I just had some conversations with the staff. We're recording this weekend. We're recording next weekend. We're recording the following weekend. So there's stuff dropping left and right, guys. Just be ready for it because we're ready to show it all to you. We're excited. So, Gabby, once again, thank you so much. It's always wonderful to talk to you. And like I said, I really hope that this is not the one time a year. I really would love to try and get you back a few more times. I know that you got a busy work schedule, but you know something? That's why that's why we're not quitting our day jobs here. This is not our full-time business here. We do these when we want to, and we do these because we enjoy them rather than making money. So I really hope that you will come back for more than one because I think the fans enjoy listening to what you have to say as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I have a background in journalism and, you know, entertainment journalism is more of my focus, my passion. Right now, I'm existing in the beauty space and I write for hairstylists and hair professionals, which complements the beauty industry or the entertainment industry pretty well. So I have fun doing these things and it's fun to get the opportunity to sit down and talk about them and be able to like really dive in because when you're passionate about something like this, it's very obvious. And um, it's been a fun world to dive into and to get to sort of see what they've been doing post Endgame. And I think that you know, it's been fun getting to do all these conversations. Like 4 years of them is really, really crazy. So thank you so much for having me. And yeah, anytime I'm happy to, I feel like you've pushed me a lot to try out different medias in new forms. So I'm excited to dive more into that. Like I said, I've been watching the DC shows for the first time, like the Arrowverse for the first time. And it's kind of like, I think been nice because it's given me a different perspective on like Marvel as well, because I think the DC does a lot better shows than Marvel does, but Marvel does better movies than DC. It's kind of like sort of
I've
my opinion
always
on
said to
that.
people, I've always said to people that Marvel dominates the big screen, but there is no debate. DC dominates the small screen in
Yeah.
live
And
action and in animated shows as well. They're the DC animated shows by Bruce Timm and Alan Burnett and Paul Dini and James Tucker and all those guys, and of course Andrea Romano being the amazing voice caster that she did before she retired. There's just some beautiful television that DC brought, and you definitely should check out. Like if you haven't watched Batman the Animated Series yet, you have no idea what you're missing. I'm just gonna say it right there.
yes. Yeah.
All right.
So much to dive into. Endless content. You could be watching for hours.
Absolutely. If only we had more time. But
I
anyway,
know.
everybody, thank you once again, and we will see you in the next one.